Thanks for coming in. I'm not sure how many of you guys are hanging out in that room, but it's good to see you, or good to virtually be there. I do have twins. Their birthday was yesterday, so in between business trips to get home to have their birthdays and then get back out for another trip and then get to Austin, it made it impossible. So I apologize. I wish I was there. I love Austin. We'll do this again next year. All right, cool. So this talk is called Irrational but Effective Applying Parenthood Lessons to Cybersecurity. I am somewhat of an expert on the Parenthood, although they're only 9, but they haven't killed me yet, so that's good. They've also not figured out a way to blow up themselves, which is also good. I've been in information security for a while. A quick who am I for those of you that have absolutely no idea who I am. That's okay. I'm the head of services strategy and go-to-market at a company called ExtraHop these days. I'm a strategist and advisor, father of twins, more importantly. Been, quote, in the business about a quarter of a century, although that sounds ridiculous to say out loud. Some of you guys may know me by the podcast, Down the Security Rabbit Hole. I encourage you to check that out. The rest you can read on LinkedIn. Doesn't matter much beyond that. I'll say don't be fooled. These two are adorable, but it's some days like the hostage negotiation with rabid terrorists. And so there's a lot of good lessons in this. All right. And there's about 10 of them. The first one for me is when things are quiet, that is when you should be really worried. And so to me, silence is terrifying. When my kids are loud, I absolutely have no idea what they're doing, but it's okay. I'm not totally worried because I can hear them, and as long as I can hear both their voices, they're both still, they're both still within earshot. They're probably not doing anything terrible, and I can get there. When they are quiet, that's when I start to panic. Now, as they get older, they play independently, and then they don't. And sometimes they just space in iPad for an hour, so they'll be super quiet. But when they were small, when kids are small and they become quiet, you should absolutely panic. So this relates to the real world. There's like 3 types of baddies as far as I'm concerned, right? Those that set off alarms, those that leave a trail, and then those that are basically ghosts. And the ghosts that you should be concerned about. Let me make this. You can make this full screen. Haha. Is that better? Yeah. Excellent. So the ghosts are the ones you should really be worried about, because the ghosts leave nothing. And that is, whether it's logs or any kind of evidence, they tend to be very, very quiet. They leave nothing, but they can be exceptionally devastating. Those are the ones, again, like those are the state-sponsored actors, are really bad ones. And so the takeaway from this, be worried when it's quiet. Don't get complacent ever. I've had, relating this back directly into AppSec in my years, way back in the day, I would hear things like, well, there's nothing that says we're being hacked, so we must be good. And that's nonsense in every possible way I can describe it. So don't get complacent. Like, always be on the assertion and assumption that something bad is happening somewhere. You're probably just not seeing it. And if you're not seeing it, that's bad. All right. The lesson 2 is you can't prevent every possible oops. Bad things will happen, and you have to learn to contain a disaster. I had a diaper reference in here, but if you're a parent, I'll just leave you with that image in your head, and we'll move on. So you can teach kids, right? You can do your best. You can teach them. You can warn them, but bad stuff will still happen. I have a colleague and a close friend that was very concerned when his teenage daughter started driving. He's like, all right, I'm gonna buy the safest car. I'm gonna teach her how to drive defensively. I'm gonna make sure that she's only driving during like certain hours when it's daylight and all that. And never accounted for the fact that a guy on a bicycle would absolutely be looking the wrong way and slammed right into her car. Like, got into an accident, and it was absolutely nothing of her fault, right? So sorry, but this is true. There are plenty of people out there that will tell you if you just simply coddle your kids enough and wrap them in duct tape and bubble wrap and never let them out of the house, nothing bad will befall them. These people do not understand risk management. And so the reality is crap is going to happen. You have to be able to prepare them and design contingency plans that you practice regularly. Okay. When I was a kid, this may be dating me, but we learned things like stranger danger. We had Big Rough the Crime Dog, right? Unfortunately, kids these days, they don't get to do stranger danger because their parents are literally over their shoulder every day, all day, with a camera staring at them when they're not. So involve everyone in this. And what I mean by that is building containment into the practice, into the platform, into the application, into the environment involves literally everybody. So it's you, the household, it's you, your neighbors, It's, getting them familiar with the police department and getting them familiar with the crossing guard, their teachers, like what good looks like and what bad looks like, frankly, because we can tell, like, hey, if somebody pulls up to while you're walking home, somebody pulls up, opens the van and says, hey, kid, get in the car, I got candy. That's probably not a good thing. And if somebody emails you and says, hey, if you click on this button, you win a free $50 gift certificate. Yes, 98% of your users will click on it, but also not a good thing. So the takeaway is, don't fail to prepare. Just because you think you've done a lot of stuff ahead of time and you've done quote, the work, don't fail to prepare, because you know what they say about failing to prepare, right? It's the preparing to fail. And that's the thing with like I learned about with kids. You can teach them as much as you can, but eventually something is going to happen that's beyond their control. In the app world, I can't tell you how many times apps would go out that would be tested and they'd be well secured. And we'd be like, all right, we're going to allow only like one port into this thing, so we're relatively safe. And somebody fat fingers a firewall rule. Not saying it was me, but all of a sudden the thing is wide open and we have a database open to the world, and bad things happen. Okay, the next one is creativity beats boundaries every time. And I think we need to think about human creativity more than we do, especially in our profession. And if you're a parent, I think this one, there's 10 in here, but this one really always gets me, because as a parent, you try to figure out in your rational adult brain how to prevent kids from doing, let's just say, things you don't want them to doing. We never really think about the fact that their brain works entirely different than yours and mine does. Let me explain. So kids and hackers are actually very similar in that they just demonstrate amazing capability for creativity. There's a phrase that I've often used both at home and at the office when doing this is, how the hell do they manage to do that? Okay. If you've ever been in this position, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Both work around controls. So it's like the best laid plans, right? You create controls, you use your rational brain to go, okay, attacker's going to try this and this and this, but I'm going to stop them by doing this. And to that I say, haha. I'll give you an example. My kids are like, when they were a couple years younger, they were very short. And so if you want them out of the cookie jar, even though they say, no, daddy, I won't take a cookie before breakfast, we all know that's a lie. So I put the cookies on the top shelf in the pantry. I don't have a picture, but I wish I did. Anybody know what happens next? Let me help you. My daughter used my son as a stepladder. And she, as you saw in that picture of them, she is built like a ballerina. He is built like a linebacker. So she simply said, apparently, that she can get up and get them both cookies if she just used him as a ladder. He hoisted her up. I come downstairs and they both have this like look on their face. I don't know if I'm still on camera, but they have that like, the raccoons in headlights thing. Like, what? And there's my daughter 2 shelves up and my son holding her, and they're sort of looking at me like, uh-oh. And my adult brain went, what the hell? How? But this is how it works in the real world. So the takeaway is, at that age and in that mindset, right? Both the attackers that you're deal with and the kids in your life, they do not think like you. They will be creative. They will have things in their brain that you cannot imagine, or you're just not able to anymore because you're old like me, and you just recognize that you have to start thinking that way. You can't say, well, the rules say, nope, that's useless. Don't use that phrase. So that's that. All right. Lesson 4, your reaction matters more than the ouchie. I actually had those of you guys that know UFC, had a stunningly interesting conversation with Frank Mir while working for HP a number of years ago. And we're sitting in this event that we were hosting, and we're talking about kids. And we get into like, because I had, my twins were, I think, just being born, or we just realized we had having twins or something like that. But he's like, yeah, kids are going to be weird and they're going to test you in ways you don't think. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, the first time my daughter or son, I don't remember anymore, but it's the first time my kid basically face planted running, that my kid looks up at me and everybody gasped and I clapped. And he's like, and the next thing that happens, my kid gets up, wipes the blood dripping off her face and keeps running and smiling. So what am I saying here? The first time your child falls, they look at you for the reaction. Okay. It's about how you react that influence the next move they take, whether they break out into tears or whether they simply keep going. Now, this becomes a learned reaction over time. Okay. So they know that if they're in trouble and they get hurt or something happens, they're going to play on mom and dad's sympathy and they win. So if you remain calm and steady, your customers will too. And this is why this applies to like incident response, downtime, parenthood, right? Resist the urge to freak out. It is not easy because I did not get the benefit of having like one kid learning from it and then having another one and then not panic on that one. I did it both at the same time, which if anybody tells you that's like having two kids, just slap them for me. It's nothing like that. It's incredibly different. So resist the urge to panic because when you do that, the people around you work off of your reaction. So the takeaway in this one is that appearances matter. Your response matters. And think of it this way, right? I'll give you guys an example. Some of you have heard this many years ago. Worked at a company. We had a reverse proxy to Exchange Server 5.5 for Outlook Web Access. Yes, that was like 17 dog years ago. And by the way, if you remember Exchange 5.5, do not tell anybody else how old we are. It will totally make us not cool. But we had reverse proxies in front of them. The person that managed them, these two Apache reverse proxies with some security rules on them, maybe even mod security, I don't remember, had left the company. One day we come in, nobody can get to OWA, and here we are absolutely just completely like, okay, we'll go investigate. We're clueless. I walked down to the data center. I pulled the keyboard out, flipped the monitor open, and a monitor on one of the two reverse proxies, which by the way are round robin in terms of how they proxy. The screen says, if you're reading this, I've compromised your machine but failed to get a shell. Sorry, try again. It's like, okay, that was weird. But things happen. And at that point, my colleague standing next to me starts absolutely panicking. He's like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Who are we gonna tell? How are we gonna make it? I'm like, this is not an incident. I'm like, hold on. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, the person that broke in is telling us, hey, I broke your stuff, but I didn't get anything out of it. And then, so we restored. We did a little forensicating, realized nothing had been, as much as you could back then, nothing had been infiltrated, nothing had been stolen. And we moved on and we chatted, basically, chalked it up to a continuity issue. We had a server break, no big deal. But if we would have freaked out like he had and declared an incident and everything, by the time the smoke settled, we would have come to the conclusion we came to later, which is it wasn't really that big of a deal. Nobody would have cared. It would have all been everywhere. Okay. This one's a little hits a little close to home because it's about kids and a little bit of ourselves. So they know better, but they're going to do it anyway. All right. And here's where this, I think, gets really weird for us. Kids, you will tell them. In fact, I had lunch with them and I was like, hey, don't start that Twix bar until you finished your sandwich. She goes, I know, Dad. I turned around for 30 seconds and there's a bite out of the Twix bar. Okay. She knew better, did it anyway. Like, I'm pretty sure she didn't care. Your users, by the way, are the same. And if you think it's just your users, I will tell you, every single one of you, including myself included in this, will do the same thing. So 2 words, compensating controls. So if you've ever used the phrase, I'm not supposed to do that, but, and don't pretend you haven't, right? Whether it's having that, fourth burger, that gas station burrito, that last beer, even though you're totally good, whatever it is, the donut, don't pretend if you haven't done it. We've all done it. We know better. We know we shouldn't have that cup of coffee at 9 p.m. because you're not going to sleep all night, but we do it anyway. And so recognize that this is human nature, okay? This is absolutely the way we are. We are wired this way. It is going to take something completely different than what we do today to unwire that. So what is the impact? Well, sometimes you get away with it, right? Sometimes my kids know better and I don't notice and they just get away with it. And you know what? That's all right. But sometimes you don't. We all know that friend that left the bar and said, no, I'm good. I just had that one. And then somebody's got to go bail them out of jail, or God forbid, something worse, right? They knew better. They were told better. In fact, they probably went through the same defensive driving and watched the same ads on TV that said, don't do that. And they did it anyway. Why? Because we think we're impervious and superhuman. Now, I will tell you, this is the reason why like 8 out of 10 security professionals click on phishing emails. Because we know better, right? It's awfully quiet in that room. I think this may be because we're all doing a little self-reflection. So look, we provide training, but training does not a behavior change make. Do you guys agree at least, more or less? So look, training is not the same as behavioral change. Giving somebody, whether it's your developers, whether it's your end users, whether it's your kids, hell, at this point, whether it's my parents, because they're in their 70s using technology that I'm pretty sure they didn't grow up with. Telling them don't do this, showing them what happens when they do this, that does not change behaviors. Repetition changes behavior. Consequences change behavior. Training does not change behavior. Anybody that's tried to do developer training once a year in October and then never again understands what I mean. So assume that they're going to break the rules. Why? Again, human nature, right? We implement compensating controls in these situations. So we go, all right, look, 8 out of 10 times they're going to do the right thing. Those other 2, how do I keep them from, completely face planting into this? And there's a couple of things. You can use 3 strikes rules. I've seen that done where like, hey, the first time you're like, all right, don't do that again. There's consequences. Second time you're like, all right, no TV for the weekend. Third time it's like, all right, we're going to have a different kind of conversation, right? So takeaway is for me that to you guys is compensate for the shortcuts. People take shortcuts. They're going to know how to do better, but sometimes they're under the gun. Sometimes they're having a bad day. Sometimes they're just too carefree to really pay attention, and they'll do the wrong thing. But you know what? That's okay, because you do it too, and I do it too. And so figure out when you're designing apps and environments and things for developers, and heck, for yourselves and for your kids, how do you compensate around that so that when they make the bad choice, it doesn't end up being catastrophic? Lesson number 6, you're the expert, but that's okay. You're never right. And this is the proverbial frog won't believe it's being boiled until it's frog legs. So I can't believe how many times I've heard my kids say, Dad, but my friend's dad said, or my friend said. You're like, okay, but your friend is the same age as you and they don't have the life experience I do. What are you doing? It doesn't matter. You are the expert as a parent. Your kids will not believe you. You know why I know this? Because we didn't believe our parents. Stop me if you think I'm wrong here. So authority and expertise are cool, but unfortunately they're not absolute. They only matter if people believe you and they follow what you're talking about and they follow what you do. So perception of all of this really matters. Look, I used to do AppSec, right? Not having ever been a developer. Well, let me put it this way, not having ever been a developer of any consequence. Like, I don't think learning Cold Fusion matters, and C was so outdated even by the time I became a developer. Like, nobody did it anymore in any consequential way. Perception matters, though. Even though I showed up in the developers part of the building and said, I'm the expert at how your apps will be hacked. You need to listen to what I'm telling you. They would look at me and go, that's adorable. You've never been a developer. And yeah, your security stuff, that's cool. And I'm sure somebody will listen to you someday and go away. So proximity matters. Be in the same space with them, the people that you're trying to change the behavior of. Dictating from an ivory tower rarely works out for anybody, whether it's heads of state, your parents, you, or people at the office. We all know that security leader, that CISO that you probably worked for at one point in time or another, that never left their office, never came down to see the common people, And people are like, yeah, I don't care what that guy says. I've never even actually met him, so I don't really give a crap. Right? Relationships matter. And I will tell you the strongest relationship you guys can possibly have is with the people you're trying to influence. And it doesn't have to be I'm your authority. Just like, yeah, go out for coffee, go out for lunch, commiserate over things that are absolutely not work related, build the relationships. My favorite relationships, and I fully recognize this makes me a little weird, were with the lawyers in my organization once I learned. Because if there's anybody in the company actually fears, it's the lawyer and eventually HR. So be present, meaning be there, right? Like be in their ear, be in their inbox, be in their space as often as you can. Don't be annoying. Nobody likes people that are annoying, but gentle reminders throughout the week, right? This is why security awareness training in October, once a year, always, 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 always fails to have any lasting impact because we're not present. You jam it into my brain for like a week, and then the rest of the year you're not present. I forget about you, right? I've got business to take care of, at home, right? If my kids are out playing, I have to check on them, and we do it via walkie system because I'm not getting them cell phones, right? They're out playing. They can stay out there. I just have to remind them, hey guys, you guys being good? Yes, Dad. Okay, what are you doing? Oh, we're playing with some. Like, okay, what are you playing? Well, we're throwing rocks at windows. Yeah, don't do that. Remember, we said no throwing rocks. Like that kind of stuff. You have to be, not that my kids don't throw rocks at windows, but you get it. Or maybe they do and I just don't know. But, look, you got to be present and be there. Be relatable. I think that if of all the mistakes that I can tell you when I implemented any sort of AppSec program or any sort of AppSec work, anything that we did that application related back in those days, and this is arguably quite some time ago, is we tried to be an authority, an authoritarian, and we were not relatable. We use phrases like "you people don't know," you guys just don't know, you just don't understand. We're smarter, therefore you should listen to us. Like that has never worked in the history of ever, and I'm not sure why. Earlier on in my career, somebody didn't give me this advice, but I'm hoping that A, you guys already know it, which is great. B, I'll just reinforce it. Please be relatable. If they don't see you as somebody that actually cares enough to be relatable, then none of this is going to be worth a crap. Also be human. Again, this is the like, hey, I get it. You've got other priorities besides me sitting here telling you to do security. But I get it. Okay. But how can I make this easier on you? How can I make it easier for you to, do all the things that you're supposed to do and also get your job done? How do I get you to deploy faster like you're supposed to? Like, oh, look, none of your metrics to getting paid and getting your bonus involve security. All right. But work with me here. Let me show you, right? That kind of stuff. Be human. AKA don't be a, donkey. The takeaway is your authority only matters if they accept it. How many times have we seen kids at the playground, at the grocery store, God help us, at a restaurant, where they throw themselves on the floor and the parents like, get up, or oh, so help me. And the kid looks at him and goes, yeah, you'll do what? Nothing. And they keep going, right? Because they don't see the parent as the authority. So look, every once in a while, you got to put your foot down and do the thing that is uncomfortable, and that makes you the authority. But you got to be relatable, be present, be human, like get them to accept your authority. And I spent a lot of time on this one, mainly because it is that important. Okay. Lesson 7, they love you until you tell them no. Be prepared to be the enemy, and that's okay. Look, guys, your kids will be your best friends, and they'll love you forever as long as you don't tell them no to something, right? That fourth donut, no problem. Second helping of ice cream, sure, absolutely. And then it's like, okay, but it is 11:45 and it's bedtime. They're like, no, you're the worst parent ever. You're like, yeah, that's okay. Get up to bed. Like eventually you have to say no, and it's okay with it that they may not like you as a result. Like my kids love me unconditionally. I know that, right? Until it's time for bed, and we're in the middle of Mario Kart, or we're playing, whatever games we played, dungeon something or other. And look, they're like, oh, come on, one more round. Nope. One more round. Nope. You never let us play. You're right. I know. I'm the worst parent ever. I make you go to bed at 10. I'm so terrible. All right, let's go up. Right. So at some point, I got to tell them no. And then you're the bad guy. No matter how awesome of a day you've had, how awesome of a year you've had, what your great track record is, like that first thing, you guys know what I'm talking about. So it's until I make them go to bed or the word no comes out, right? What happens next is really kind of odd though. They tend to turn super quickly, but recognize that if you're doing things for the right reasons, you explain, right? You're not malicious or mean, and you explain to them that this is for their benefit. That animosity tends to be pretty temporary. I tell you, this happens in the business world quite a bit, where suddenly if you've ever taken away admin access from people's workstations, right? It doesn't matter how awesome that you are or how much they love you. You are now the devil, right? You are the worst human being that's ever walked the earth because they can no longer install some Facebook widget or whatever the hell they do these days. And it's amazing. But that access being restricted, that animosity because of it tends to be temporary. So stay the course, trust your policy. What you want is respect. Now, yes, you want to be liked, but there's a limit. So be fair. And the takeaway from this one is be respected always, but liked usually. And if it comes down to it in a business environment, and if I have to choose between somebody liking me and somebody respecting me enough to just do, kind of like just take my word for it sometimes, I'll take the trust, the respect and trust, right? They may not always love me and may not always even like me. And sometimes they feel like slashing my tires in the parking lot. But ultimately they know, all right, yeah, this is for the better good. Whatever, jerk. Like that happens more than you know. Sometimes you must meet them halfway or else, because you can't fight water, you can only direct it. There's a quote about water from Bruce Lee, which I don't remember anymore. But the reality is sometimes you got to meet people halfway. And in cybersecurity and life and everything else, if you're an absolutist, you lose. So sometimes policy needs flexibility. What does that mean? Well, look, homework is a priority. Nobody's going to dispute that. But it's going, and you have to get your homework done before you can go outside and play. But it's going to rain in an hour, and you've got about an hour's worth of homework. So I can be the jerk that says your homework always has to be done before you go out and play. And by the time you're done, it could be raining. And then I'm like, oh man, now I feel like a jerk. Or I can say, okay, you can go out and play for an hour. That gives you an hour before bedtime to finish your homework. So now play now, but you got to promise me, right? Pinky swear that you're going to do the thing that I asked you to when your timer is up. Now, enforcing that promise is super important because they'll test those limitations. I promise you. So be flexible, but give them a fair alternative, but enforce that alternative, enforce that deadline. And this works the same in business, right? Be appropriately flexible. Absolutists always lose, and really nobody likes a dictator. And there are times, look, where in the release cycles of all the times I watched apps go out, I can't think of a single time where I said, nope, this app can absolutely not go out with this thing ever, and I won that argument. It was always a yes, but it was always like, zero defects never worked for anybody, mainly because I don't think that's a thing anymore. But we always had to be flexible on policy. We could say, all right, I recognize you made a customer commitment. I also recognize your code is the effective holding water of Swiss cheese. So look, where are we going to meet in the middle here? Like, all right, I'll give you an extra week, but I'm going to scrutinize this thing and I'm going to stare at it every day to make sure somebody hasn't broken it. But I'm telling you right now that in a week, if this isn't fixed, I'm taking it off net. That's just that simple. And you have to give that flexibility. So flex but don't abdicate means just because you have to be flexible on policy doesn't mean you're now abdicating the authority or the need to still enforce policy. Like those are not mutually exclusive and hopefully in your world. Don't abdicate the fact that you still have work to do just because you're trying to be flexible. If you don't strategically bend, your policy will be subverted. This is an unfortunate lesson that time teaches us. And look, I've been there where you say absolutely not, and they find, and whoever it is that's trying to get around it will do one of a couple of things that will work. They'll find somebody with a higher authority than you that doesn't know the situation that will allow them to get away with it, and then you're screwed. Or they'll smile and nod and then figure out a way, like again, the one you weren't expecting or the one you've never seen coming, to subvert you. Or next time, they simply won't come to you, or they'll find a way around your policy. That is not what you want, right? And the takeaway is grant limited exceptions. It doesn't say grant no exceptions. It doesn't say let people do whatever you want. It's grant limited exceptions, because the world, unfortunately, is not black, white, yes, no, wrong, right. Right? There are millions of shades of gray in this thing that we do for a living, and you have to give people flexibility to get their job done, to accomplish goals, while also getting as close to what we want as possible. Right? The most secure application, the most secure asset or system is the one that's unusable. So we've got to find a way through it. All right, lesson number 9, be a friend in authority, but know the difference, because much like your kids, people will take advantage of you if you let them. And here's what I mean. Kids do absolutely need balance, right? They shall go unnamed, but I have friends that have kids who want to be, you never want their kids mad at them. God forbid, they want to be their kids' buddies, and their kids run absolute roughshod over them. They do whatever they want because, God forbid, mom and dad say no. So they want to be their friend, but you've got to know the limitations. This is the same in the business world. And sometimes you'll have to be the, aw, dad guy. Like I'm that all the time. Guess what? They still love me, I think. And so be your customer's buddy. You know who are your customers, right? You're everybody that's not you in the organization or your actual customer. Be their buddy, but also know that there are boundaries to that, right? You want to be sympathetic. You want to be empathetic. You want to be able to understand their plight and their cause. Like, I know you got to get this thing out. I know you were out sick for a week, and I know now you have absolutely no time to do any of the security precautions. I get that. Maybe we can work something out, but I can't let you just let this thing go, because it is going to be a train wreck. I'm sorry, right? Our job is relationships, and without them, we're tyrants. And every tyrant in history, including the one over in the that eastern part of Europe right now, meets the exact same end on a sufficiently long timeline, right? They end up in a bad place rapidly. And so coach and counsel is important, but enforce limitations. Allow people to have the benefit of a shoulder to cry on, and then nudge them back in the right direction. The takeaway is, I think, the thing that we suck at in this profession, and maybe it's because of kind of the quirky nature of the way we think and the way our brains work, or the kind of people that are drawn into this profession. And I know I get sideways glances when I say this, but we are not good generally at relationships in the long run, and we've got to get better. We have this us versus them thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but that was how cyber began. It was us versus them. Like the whole, I'm going to dress differently, talk differently. I'm going to act differently than all of you other normal people because I'm cooler than you. It got us to the place we sit at today, where a lot of people simply do not respect the weirdos in the other part of the building because nobody understands what they're saying, and they're absolute tyrants. We could argue that point, but it is true about 80% of the places I've been in terms of consulting or worked in the last 25 years. If we don't master relationships, none of this other crap matters. If you don't master the relationship with your kids, with their teachers, your friends, your neighbors, right? None of this matters, because none of it will work. And so the final one here is, tomorrow won't be better or worse. It's just going to be different. And maturity brings different types of disaster scenarios. I'll explain in a second. So parents to be always ask me the following thing, like, hey, is 9 easier than when they were 2? And my answer is always the same. Nope, it's just different, right? One of my kids' pediatricians at one point said, as parents, we spend the first 2 to 3 years teaching them to walk and talk, and then the next 18 to sit down and shut up. Yeah, that's what I thought you'd. I figured y'all get a good laugh at that one. Tell me that's not true though. Like once they learn to talk, you're like, oh my God, why did I teach you this? Because you now do not shut up, right? And much for us, right? So is the age of 2 any different than the age of 9? I mean, yeah, dramatically. Is it like less stressful? Oh God, no. Because at 2, I was making sure my kids didn't accidentally fall down the stairs or like impale themselves on the corner of some table. Now I worry about like, oh, they're out on their bikes riding. Like, hey, are they going to get run out into the street or on as they're playing on Roblox, are they going to get talked up by some creepo, right, adult somewhere? Like we have way different problems. They're not any better or worse. They're just different. And this is kind of as companies mature, as your staff matures, as your IT matures, as your security matures, the problems don't get better or worse. They just get different, and you have to adapt. The challenges at 2, the challenges at 8, the challenges at 18, way different in their own little way, right? The risks shift. The risk at 2 or at 1 really, right, is choking on the blanket or rolling over and suffocating or something. And that's why parents don't sleep the first 3 years, 10 years. 18 years, but eventually you want, like, you wonder, not are they asleep and safe, but why is it 11:45 that the car should have been in the garage 15 minutes ago? Oh my God, what happened? Right? That's where your brain goes. The threats are different. The challenges are different. As your org matures, this absolutely applies. Bigger companies, bigger problems. Smaller companies, smaller problems. They're all problems. We used to say like, hey, back in the day when there was, we just all had a T1 and a firewall, security was easy. No, it wasn't. It was just as hard back then. We just didn't understand the scope of the problem. Now, yes, I do long for days where, data didn't live in the cloud or on everybody's mobile device everywhere in the world. Like I could point to it and say, those 2 hard drives have our corporate data. That was easy, right? Believe me, I long for those days. They are gone. But the problems we face today are different. And it's really interesting, right? We have different problems, we have different threats, and the scope is wildly different of these problems. The scope when the program is young is the people that you can talk to directly and see right there. Over time, it evolves to like this huge landscape of developers, customers, infra people, ops people, legal counsel, CEOs, like everybody, and it's completely different. So security challenges change, and security teams must have to adapt. The threats, challenges, and change as the org matures, right? And the one lesson here is the rock that won't move is worn away slowly. If you are standing in the river saying, no, I'm not going to change, I don't care what you say, that water will wear you away, and what you will be is fired or irrelevant or both. And I've met both. So that's a little bit about me. I think I'm right about on time. I don't know if you guys want to do questions or Q&A, but go check out the podcast if you haven't yet. It's got its own Twitter feed, DTSR_podcast. I'm the White Rabbit. Thanks for listening. Sorry I wasn't there in person, y'all.